Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. This video is about a cut glass accent. Or should I say, the cut glass accent. Anyhow, I've talked about the accent of the British upper middle class and indeed upper class quite a bit. So here's another edition of it. There are various terms for this accent which overlap, as I pointed out: Standard British English, Southern British English, RP, which is a received pronunciation. It was estimated in the 70s that only 3% of the United Kingdom's population speak with this accent. I wonder if it's a bit higher than that. Again, it's a question of definition because it's difficult to decide where the cutoff is. I was speaking to a doctor from Birmingham the other day, and she speaks with more or less this accent. There might be some mild brummy inflection in her accent as well. So a cut glass accent might also be called advanced RP, as in it's a very distinctive type of received pronunciation, or conservative RP because it's a bit old-fashioned these days. So people of my generation, virtually nobody would sound this way. Even the Made in Chelsea set, not so much of them. I wonder they're hamming it up for the camera as well. But anyway, so it's something which has largely disappeared. Her Majesty the Queen used to sound more like this. The last Empress of India sounds a bit like this. A woman who I set my eyes on in the year 2000. Something to tell my grandchildren if I ever have them. I saw the Empress of India. Hard to believe even now that such a person ever existed. Anyhow, the Empress of India, that's the Queen Mother to you and me. She lived in Clarence House in London. And famously, the cut glass way to pronounce it was Clarence House. The thing about it being called cut glass accent, because the sort of people who had this accent would have a lot of crystal and chandeliers at home and things like that. So suggests that they're very well-to-do, very well-got, and they're crashing snobs, which is sometimes a bit unfair. So they often spoke quite fast, to come across as being stratospherically stuck up, which is often the case, meant to be sneering, looking down their aquiline noses at hoi polloi. That's the likes of you and me. In 1940s films, you'll hear it quite a lot. If you see the film Rebecca, it's based on that novel by Daphne du Maurier. A bit of the voiceover is that saying, "Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again." Something about the long, tenacious fingers. I don't remember the rest of it. Very precise pronunciation of certain sounds, especially the shirt and shirt sounds. And in it, the lead character, she gets engaged. I think she's or married, and she's offered bouquets of flowers. And she's saying, "How lovely, how perfectly lovely." But she's saying, "How lovely, how perfectly lovely." Or mispronouncing some of the vowels, like hands, pronounced it's got an E in the middle, saying hands. Or the Goon Show used to ridicule it. Peter Sellers, who would have had a more or less a working class accent. I think he poshed it up a bit because he was in theatre, but he came from an ordinary family in Hampshire, so that's close enough to London. And one of the Goon Shows, they're saying, "It can be cold in London, damn cold." But they do it in this cut glass accent, saying, "It can be cold in London, damn cold." And he's obviously extracting the Michael from the upper class. And people who were BBC announcers back then, army officers, RAF officers, they would have sounded that way. He'd been in the army, I think it's in the war. Or if you see Dr. Strangelove, Peter Sellers plays an RAF officer, and again, he's lampooning British military officer speak. I think Royal Naval officers not quite so much, because they often came from more modest backgrounds because it was been a really tough job being at sea a lot of the time. All right, so it was very much a jolly hockey sticks accent, particularly amongst women, saying Parliament as Parliament. So I wonder if that was an exception. Rather than pronouncing it in a more exact fashion, they're pronouncing almost sloppily, languorously. The word fire, because I told you how it's a non-rhotic accent. There's a very good example. And it was going on very recently. I went to a lecture by Hugh Strawn in 2003, very well-known historian, Chicheley Professor of War at Oxford University. Indeed, his surname looks like it's spelled Strachan. Well, it looks like it's pronounced Strachan, but pronounce it Strawn. Great one for the long A's there. What's the CH doing there? Just to separate the two A's? But anyway, he was saying fire, as in fire, as in F-I-R-E. He was saying create a wall of fire to do with the First World War, a certain tactic. Watch the film Zulu, came out in 1962. It's set in 1879, that real battle in February 79, Battle of Rorke's Drift, and Stanley Baker and Michael Caine are there. They're giving the order to their men, fire, fire, as in fire. So Stanley Baker presumably had a Cambric accent, being Welsh, and Michael Caine, he's definitely got a South London one, really. My name is Michael Caine. You were only supposed to blow the bloody doors off, and he had to play an army officer, so they had very upper class accents in those days. Well, from centuries ago until the 1960s. Although apparently the upper class accent, as we know it, only emerged really late 19th century, even into the 1920s. You know, Gladstone's said to have had more of a Lancashire accent. He came from Liverpool. He went to, which was then part of Lancashire, not an independent city, if I got that right. Went to Eton, went to Oxford University, and then how people spoke at court, the court of St James. Maybe that somewhat influenced it. Public schools started going, and the late 19th century, people were travelling faster by rail, so that carried the accent. And the 1920s, BBC started broadcasting in 1922. The BBC accent spent very rapidly indeed, so it's questionable. Where did I get to? So that film Zulu, saying chin chin to mean keep your chin up, cheer up. Chin up, Sonny, would have been a real thing to say. Saying mother, father, and actually addressing them as that, not just mother and father. What else? Saying to a group of children, one wouldn't normally address them that way. Calling a man, if you think he's lower social status, just calling him man or indeed woman. So again, this is gone out the window these days. But I'm hyperthymesic, so I'm always backward looking, just fixated with memory. And that film Zulu, some other lines which spring to mind. Rather you asked, next time, old boy. So men, even if they're very young, calling each other old boy, which even in the 90s, my English teacher, Mr. Graham Campbell, remarking that was an anachronism back then. He's talking about men in their early 20s, saying this is atavistic. But perhaps it was a studied throwback to an earlier generation, trying to get people's attention and saying this in a scolding tone, now look here. Or if you wanted to emphasize something, saying, now mark this. There was a letter, I think it was sent by General Charles Gordon, Chinese Gordon in Khartoum, saying, now mark this. But that means this next bit is important. Pay attention, mark in that sense, like underline it. Or I've even heard Nigel Farage on Question Time about 5 years ago saying, mark you, before he begins a certain comment as in, notice this, because this is going to be very important. Things like that. So those are some of the examples of a cut glass accent. So I'll try and say that again in a cut glass accent. So there's some of the examples of a cut glass accent. So very precise on the T, very sharp pronunciation. That's what a cut glass accent's all about. So only if you're a theatrical sort of person would you need to know this. Thespians, if you're playing people from a period drama, that might be a little bit useful to you. So please, comments, questions. What's your code? What type of English do you speak? What are the distinctive phrases, the social markers from your argot? I'd like to hear, because I'm immensely curious about linguistics.